What's up, Nick Silky?
What's up, Joshua Timberman?
Not a whole hell of a lot.
I'm
Hey,
excited.
folks.
I'm excited to talk to folks who aren't my discreet work colleagues.
Yes, yes, indeed. I mean, one of my work colleagues will be here shortly. He said he's going to be running late, but we'll have Pete here at some point.
Oh, Pete.
Hey, Carl.
Hey, I'm apologize for not being on camera. I'm
That's all right.
a little bit. I really just rolled out of bed and pulled my hair back today. That's about as good as it's going to get after yesterday.
I mean, if you ever wonder why I wear a hat,
It's actually really funny. I never, if you ever catch me on a call without this hat, like my colleagues go crazy. They're like, "Where's the hat? Go get it." Like we can't start. Like it's always on.
yeah. Oh my goodness. What kinds of folks are joining?
Asked whether I was going to fix my hair eventually, and I finally got it fixed. So it used to be like 3 or 4 times the length, and definitely lighter.
Heck yeah. Hello, hello.
Hello, all. Long time no see, Daniel.
You do. You do coffee ops way too early for me, so I keep doing yours. And
Yeah, that reminds me, I need to put a poll up to see what other time works for people. I'm thinking maybe either noon or 5:30 Mountain Time. Joshua, you're in Colorado, right? What works better for you?
Yeah, I'm in Westminster.
I just have 8:30 Pacific time meetings now, and 8 o'clock meetings.
Ugh. Those are too early for meetings.
Yeah.
Imagine if I worked for an East Coast company.
We're a distributed company, but most of the people here are in like the Boston area.
So you're on the wrong side of the time zone.
It's a little early.
I like working for a Pacific company just because we get an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, I work for a company where technically part of the state they're in is in Mountain Time, but we're a Pacific company. But every time I've interviewed for any company, basically Central or East Coast, they're like, "No, we start at like 7:30 in the morning local time," and I'm like,
"What? Oh, that's adorable." But I'll see at 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do you, but that's not for me.
Yeah, like I'm sorry. Even in summer, daylight isn't up that early in the Pacific Northwest.
It's true. It's true. Well, cool. How did everybody's day go yesterday?
It made me happy to not be on call.
So what was the extent of the outage affecting people? Like, I didn't really, I'm not in an operations team anymore, so I didn't really know what was affecting folks. I just know that it was bad news for a lot of people.
We're a pretty small footprint. Like, we don't have to auto scale or anything. So for us, I just had us freeze deployments and freeze anything that would rely on US East 1 APIs. We got by, but like I couldn't hit ECR when I was trying to prototype some stuff. I couldn't do all kinds of random stuff. Console was screwed unless you like did that workaround where you went in from a specific region.
So it was a failure to make API calls against US East 1.
I mean,
Pretty much.
yeah, pretty much. I'm sure there was more going on under the hood, but that's how it would manifest. I was just getting 500 errors all over the place.
Things like auto scaling and stuff that were and lambdas and stuff that relied on events, and things like SDS email, SNS notifications and stuff like that. Pretty much none of that worked. So you didn't get any notifications when an object got dropped into S3, even though S3 was up and working, stuff like that. So for us, the main impact was that we couldn't scale up in EC2. Oh yeah, and our support team had no email.
Oh, because you're using SES for your transport layer for email?
Yeah, yes, but so do a lot of other providers like Zendesk.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that'll be a problem. Yeah, we use HubSpot, but we also have like I think a number of customers in our Slack connects. So I'm not sure. Our service was, as far as I know, was mostly up and running. There'd be a sporadic or occasional API errors, but I was not particularly highly involved in any of that. As I said, I'm not in an ops team anymore.
I feel like Amazon itself also had some, like Amazon store had some issues because like right around the same time I was having issues trying to get to my orders page, which I thought was really surprising. Like afterwards, I heard that US East 1 was having an issue, and I was like, wow, if it took out Amazon itself, like the app, 10 points there.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I heard a lot of their fulfillment stuff was on the fritz. They subcontract out all the like last mile stuff, and all of that integration didn't work. So there were people with like vans of packages and like no idea where they went.
Yeah, there was an article in the HangOps channel about the impact to delivery and order fulfillment.
Yeah, I heard they
Yeah.
even were having issues inside the warehouses where like people were standing around in the break rooms because nothing was coming down to be packed.
Yeah, it's all that stuff relies on DynamoDB and Lambdas.
And apparently all of that happens to be in another one of their like well-known to fail data centers. Like West 1 and East 1 are like the top two you don't stick resources in. At least that's what I remember from 4 years ago.
Yeah, when I was at Chef, I think we ran everything in. I think all the production stuff was running in East 1, but all of the everything else internally that we ran in AWS was in West 2.
Yeah, a couple jobs ago, I moved all of our stuff out of East 1 and into West 2. Because we were like, we don't actually care about getting the new stuff first. We'd rather let somebody else be the one beta testing. And this way we're away from, well, as away as you can be and still be in AWS from the blast radius. At least it's not falling over. And maybe it's changed lately, but at the time we were just like, it's easier to get resources of when you're looking at oddball instance types outside of US East, because all the examples say US East 1. Yeah, so everybody moves into US East 1 first, because until you've been in AWS for a while, you don't know what a dumpster fire that can be. So and then for some people it's too late because they have 5,000 instances running in East 1, and data has an inertia of all on its own.
Or you have to deploy a product because of a customer as like a interaction between you and that customer, and they believe in US East 1, and you're like, oh, this will be fun.
I mean, I suppose it gives you good reasons to test your cross-region deployment tooling, but
If you have a cross-region deployment tool,
well, it gives you a reason to make it.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing that comes up every single time there's a large, widespread AWS outage, right?
we're in GCP, so deploying to AWS is an adventure on the first, like, we have very little in AWS anymore, and like this customer's product is like, hey, we need this so that we can communicate between your systems and our systems. And it only deploys in AWS in US East 1, where we can then share the image with you. And I'm like, okay.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Joshua.
How was your day yesterday?
My day was pretty okay, all things considered. It was busy. I had lots of meetings.
Oh, yeah. Did any
Yeah.
of them mention the letters W, S, or A in a different order?
Not mine in particular, but I know that some folks that I work with had a pretty, I want to say really smooth failover to US West 1
Oh, okay.
on a couple things. So yeah, it was impressive. Speaking of a person who used to be in sort of the ops and SRE kind of role and is not anymore. So being an observer of that and seeing them do, you know, that in a fraction of the amount of time that, you know, back in the day, it would have taken ages.
Or not happened at all. And you
or
just
not
wait.
happened at all and you just wait. Exactly. Never been through that before. But yeah, it was really cool. It was cool to see, at least for us. I mean, it sucks for a lot of people, I know, but one of my friends was like, oh yeah, I went to my insert large financial company name account and it was not up. And that's when I found out that large company name is using all of their stuff in US East 1. I was like,
That's
oh,
amazing.
That's good to know. Let me move my funds around.
Well, that's a good way to test all your critical things is if you hear about an outage with any service provider, you should go check like specific services and see if they're a part of it.
This thing was hitting other regions though with what was it, STS, right?
Yeah, the DNS propagation that happened after or didn't happen afterwards was the thing that like we had to wait for because it was just sort of like, well, we've done all we can. Like everything is running over here now, and like, but
That's why you said every TTL to like 5 minutes, right?
Speaking of DNS, here's Pete.
it's just a database, anyways.
It is. It's a
That's-
distributed database.
It's a distributed database. That's right.
Didn't Corey Quinn say that it was the most distributed database and most stable database you could ever use is Amazon AWS or Route 53?
Yeah, update latency can be a little challenging though.
Yeah, like you wouldn't. I mean, I've done terrible things with text records, like everyone probably has at some point. I've experimented with text records back in college, mostly.
I can either confirm
But
or
did you
deny.
inhale?
Nah, man,
Text
never
records, not even once.
Hey, eventual consistency is a strategy.
It's a strategy for a lot of people. They just don't realize it.
I mean,
Feels like a personal attack.
Well, I feel like I missed the beginning part. Has there been any like public discussion of what the actual problem was, other than like overloaded networking gear, which
Not that I've heard.
I assume means someone forgot to either turn off or on spanning tree? I always forget which way it goes.
both.
It goes whatever the way you don't have your switches set to. That's the one that you want.
Yes. Every time.
Whatever you set it to, that was wrong. Oh,
That
it
was
was
wrong.
working for 6 months. Yeah, it still was wrong. You flip the bit, and now it's working again for another 6 months. But yeah, DNS is Atlas holding up the world, and just occasionally Amazon slips that shiv between the ribs. Actually, that's not fair to Amazon. It's not really, it's not necessarily, it's not an Amazon only thing to mess up DNS. They're just extra visible.
Yeah.
Hey, at least it wasn't BGP.
I mean, we still don't know yet, right?
Well, this is actually where at least Amazon has it going for them, is that they're not stupid enough to build their own implementation of BGP like Facebook is. They'll,
Creative,
you know,
creative, please, Pete.
sorry,
Creative
yes.
enough.
I mean,
Good point.
This is a happy place. We're all friends.
The
Yes.
story I've heard about AT&T once, where they messed up BGP and sent all of their traffic for a region down someone's T1 line.
Yeah, that happens. It's a thing.
The only reason I won't touch BGP. It's really the only reason.
No, I've been fortunate enough not to have to deal with BGP yet. When I've been at places big enough where that mattered, they had a dedicated network engineering team. And, you know, I'm not about to step on their toes, especially about something I don't pretend to know about, because I would like them to return the favor. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Could be
Ask
worse.
me about-
Could be OSPF.
No, at least they're not running RIP. I'll happily go play with my VLANs and leave everything else to the outside world.
I can endorse that plan.
I haven't even done anything with VLANs on anything really in years. I forget what those are. Does my wireless router have one? I don't know.
I did fight through that with my Unify gear, and fortunately, a friend who is a former NetOp happened by and was like, help me set that up. But I wanted to have like one VLAN for all my IoT trashware, and then one for guests, and one for my wife and I. I've literally made a shirt. IoT, the S stands for security. So I really don't want any of that where it can assault my servers and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm most annoyed with
of,
the. Oh, go ahead.
A couple of jobs ago, I had to basically go from being a sysadmin to being the network operations person, because we had what I called the super colliding superconductor of TCP traffic. There were 3 or 4 routers in 2 racks, and all of them were on the same network. There was a layer 7 load balancer that was operating as a router. And there was a Viata with a bunch of really weird things done to it, such that it rewrote the TTL on every TCP packet that went through it. The end result of this was that there were a ton of loops in the network. And because of that Viata that was doing just weird garbage, it was basically allowing traffic to just loop forever and ever and ever and ever until it collided with something else on one of the completely overloaded switches and got dropped because of a collision.
Yeah.
So I had to unscrew all of that by learning network operations.
I built an AV network with VLANs, but when you're dealing with people who don't understand networking beyond I plug the thing in and it works, I now have traffic that I would prefer to segregate, because it really should be segregated, sitting on the same network to make them happy, and it hurts my soul. But I've also got 20 gigs of bandwidth between the one side of the room and the other side of the room, so I don't really care. Just traffic segregation should be a thing, but gotta appease people. And then I live in a house with 3 SSIDs on the same network. What's the point?
The point is that way you can give out a password to guests and not, I mean, if you don't care about like them using the same network as your trusted equipment, it's better than like it's better. I'd rather change that guest password than change my real Wi-Fi password and have to, because I don't care if it's a pain in the ass for the guests to go and change the password on all their devices that are using my network. I care way more about it being a pain in the ass for my wife or I to have to go change all our passwords. And
yeah, it turns out it's only used to do bandwidth limiting for IoT devices.
And that's a valid reason to have a separate SSID. I went ahead and made a separate VLAN for the IoT stuff just because I trust none of it. It's all made with the lowest possible cost, with who knows when or if they're ever going to do any firmware updates. And even if they did, how am I going to find out? Because they don't actually email me any notification of stuff like that. So I have to treat them as, radioactive devices and just keep them in their own little, reactor cooling tower. But I'm pretty neurotic about my IoT stuff. I don't let anything that I have that's IoT talk to servers on the internet, because I don't want my stuff breaking because some startup ran out of money, and they turned the thing off, or they decided, hey, you know what? Instead of having an API, we're going to force you to use our crappy phone application. And it's like, I don't really want to have half a dozen different crappy phone applications that I have to use depending on which switch I happen to buy at any given time. Because I have a relatively diverse set of IoT devices, because I maintain the Works with Home Assistant list. So I tend to buy like a new device rather than going with like, well, this one worked, I'll buy another. I buy a new one just to see if it works, and if it does, great. But that means I have 4 different kinds of switches in my walls, with a mix of Z-Wave and Zigbee. And I really need to start asking vendors to send me free gear.
Indeed. It's usually the best way to get gear is to get it for free, right?
Yeah. On the one hand, I want the gear for free, but on the other, it's like, does it make the recommendations on the list any less? Does it make them less valid if I'm given the gear free by the vendor? I feel like it means I'm going to get a wider variety of stuff and to test. And I'm happy to say they sent me this for free, and I'm also happy to say it, and it doesn't frickin' work. But
I need to update one of the listings too. I added something to that was like, it half works. And now since I have 3 of them, I can say that it is inconsistent at best.
Yes, PR is welcome. And I actually mean it. I don't mean it in a GFY sense.
Please help.
Yeah.
Speaking of IoT devices that don't need to be IoT devices, I don't know if I can't remember if I brought this up at one of the previous incarnations of this, but my partner and I bought a air purifier for, we have cats.
Wanting to breathe.
Yeah, it's good to use, and we both have allergies and things like that. So hooray! Got a nice, relatively expensive-ish, what you call it? I think it's like a Honeywell, whatever. Doesn't matter. We got it and found that it has Bluetooth and an app. And I was like, it's got all these buttons that you turn, like it rotates. It has 3 different settings in terms of speed. and a Bluetooth app.
Oh.
I have not
There's-
installed the Bluetooth app, so, but I am going to rip it apart and see if I can figure out what I can hack it.
Yeah, rather than do a Bluetoothectomy on it, try and figure out the API.
Essentially.
Yeah.
It's
My only Internet of Things device I have is my TV, which I would argue that a TV doesn't need it, but also it's nice to not have to plug a bunch of things into it in order to watch Netflix or Disney Plus or Plex. So
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I'm using a Roku to do all that though, because I feel like Roku actually updates their software. Whereas like the TV manufacturers seem to be like, well, we fired it into the void and that's the last software update you're going to see.
Mine's a Sony, which seems to be fairly well updated. At least, half the time when I go to watch a show, it has to reboot.
Yeah, I should say my Vizio has twice now when I've turned it on and wanted to watch something, been like, and now 10 minutes of software updates for the software you never ever use. And for your convenience, we're not going to trouble you by asking you if you want to defer it. We're just going to do it right away anyway. And too bad if you thought you were going to do something.
That I have the same Vizio, I have a Vizio similar, and it just like every now and then just like update 1 of 37.
Yeah,
like,
I need to cut off its internet access. It's not. I actually thought I had, but I need to go into the Unify controller and just blacklist it.
My last house, we had a Android TV based TV, and that thing crashed all the time. But what I found, at least minor, small experience, the Roku TVs don't get updates as often as the Roku devices do. Like the TVs are the Roku TVs, which run supposedly Roku software, seem to also kind of be firing the void TVs anyway, even though like it's supposed to be Roku, it's supposed to be Roku hardware. It's really
my suspicion is that the vendor gates any updates. So like Roku is publishing these updates on a whatever cadence they are, and the vendor doesn't enable it for their product line as often. But that's just a suspicion. I have no underlying info about it, because my brother-in-law and my sister have a Roku TV, and they've made the same observation that like, yeah, the Roku brick that we have connected to the other TV seems to get updates way more often than the TV does. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for like, look, just let the TV do it. One less device to hassle with. But I know that they're expensive and they don't call them TVs, they call them commercial displays, but I really want something that all it does is it takes HDMI inputs and displays those on the screen, and doesn't try to be smart, and doesn't, and certainly I don't want it monitoring my viewing habits, which is another reason that I don't use the built-in applications on the TV. I don't know that Roku is necessarily more trustworthy than Vizio is, but I know that Vizio and not just Vizio, but a bunch of the TV manufacturers have a rep of like scraping your screen and selling that information.
Yeah, I've heard various rumors about that kind of stuff, or the types of traffic that like they'll sniff on the Wi-Fi network, and they'll try and get other devices that are talking with other applications to see what you're watching on, like Hulu or something else that isn't whatever app. It's all,
yeah, I would hope
it's all
that
terrible and bad.
I would think that for the sake of trying to prevent piracy, that those services would be SSL. so that you couldn't just do it, you know, a TCP dump or something to capture TV episodes or movies while you're watching them. But who knows? I have not actually watched the traffic going on when my Roku is active, because no good will come from that. I'm still going to want to watch Netflix and Amazon and Prime Video, and I don't really have a lot of options. And it's just going to make me angry if they are unencrypted streams and able to be monitored. But I won't be able to do anything about it, so that is not helpful information in any way.
Indeed.
You can shake fist at cloud.
Yes,
Old man shakes fist at
old man
cloud
shakes
is,
fist.
yeah. Every Slack should that Slack emoji should just be in every Slack. They should just add that to the global Slack
That
emoji.
one in
actually-
bushes.
Yes.
2 jobs ago, I actually had old man yells at cloud on my business cards. It was my test to see if any humans were evaluating what we put on our business cards. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I got a box of cards with that.
Nice. I had to rename our, so I wanted to create a public DevOps Slack room. So I had to rename our team private channel to DevOps.
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff on Redbubble with the DevOps tag.
The only time anyone's ever paid attention to a silly title or anything like that was one time I gave my employer as tire fire, comma, MCSA to CV or whatever, you know, the South American Business Organizational Unit. And somebody came up and started speaking to me in very excited Spanish. And I speak enough of it to respond, but that I felt a little bad about misleading them.
The SRE team is colloquially named Ireland because of infrastructure resilience engineering. And then we had a teammate who is from Ireland. And now I'm just like, this is a weirdness that I guess we're just accepting at this point, but like, wah.
Yeah.
The initials of my team name, if you like put them together, is Cutie. UTI.
You
It was
need an
unintentional.
orange. You need
I'm
an
going to
orange
put
as
this
your
in
icon.
the chat. Because it's not really, actually, never mind. It's so not work safe. I'm not even going to mention it in chat. It's
That's all right. The chat doesn't get recorded.
Screenshots are forever.
yeah. This is one that yeah, ask me about unfortunate team names that had about a 90-second lifespan after they were announced. The next time I see any of you in person, if that is ever a thing again. But
there is a project that I have worked on where it became very obvious very quickly that the acronym was extremely problematic, but by that point it had already launched, and you know, it was out there, and yeah, all the documentation, all of that, all of it in the code, it was just sort of a.
This one wasn't that so much that the acronym was bad as that you could use it to kind of fill in the blanks of a very extremely not work safe meme. And yeah.
It's always good to run those. Like, naming is super hard. I think we can all agree on that. But it's always good to like throw it by a couple people.
Just find your resident millennial or zennial, basically someone probably under the age of 40, 35, and just tell them what you're about to do. Just a quick, and watch their face reaction. That's all you have to do. It's it's pretty simple.
Or type your name into Urban Dictionary, and if it shows up there, don't use it.
Yeah.
That leads to boring names, but boring is sometimes good.
Is there a follow on to
I-
that, which is if your name ends up showing up in Urban Dictionary, change it?
I mean, name changing is a difficult and arduous process for things, but like step one, is it on Urban Dictionary? Okay, now let's go do these other things in order to find out if the name is good at all.
Yeah,
Or rather, if it's, bad at all.
yeah. I mean, there's an argument that can be made that any name can be found to be problematic if you look at enough other languages or Urban Dictionary or other slang. But I mean, at some point you have to land on something, and that's where you get the boring names like operations team, or resilience.
Weren't there some interesting new names of things coming out of reInvent last week? I remember people talking about that, or is that just always the thing with reInvent? Is that all the names are confusing and hard to follow?
There was one.
Was CloudWatch, evidently, which I still don't believe is not a joke. Like that has to be a joke,
but April's not for like 4 more months.
Well, Amazon likes to, be ahead of the curve.
Evidently.
But yeah.
Trying to look for it because there were a couple of them that were very like, I remember seeing that and just being like, what?
Yeah. Was anybody here at reInvent? I know Pete wasn't, because I know that background of your office pretty well now.
Yep. I was making latkes instead. It was Hanukkah. So
heck yeah.
Nice.
I literally hurt my back making latkes. It finally just now, just like this week, I feel like I'm not in pain as I do minor tasks.
Oh.
Yeah, I have
To be
a
fair, those
friend.
look-
Explain to me how you pulled off hurting your back making latkes.
Yeah, getting old, man. It's a trip.
I've hurt my back sneezing, so I had a sneezing fit
confirm.
because of pollen, and hurt my back. So I am not.
I think it was.
have
I
two
think honestly, it was just standing, right? Like you're kind of standing, but you're standing at a stove, so you're like slightly hunched over, like just enough. And
Yeah.
I think what happened was I went to like reach for something, and I was just like, I felt that like twinge, and I was like, ooh, that's gonna leave a mark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I at one point I had bronchitis, so I was doing the very intense like coughing and sneezing and stuff like that, and I had a particularly violent sneeze in the kitchen at my friend's house where I was living, and I managed to explode the 2 top ribs under my armpit, and just basically shatter them into bone fragments for a little spot about yay big. At which point I immediately fell to the ground and started crying because it hurt like you can imagine. But yeah, then I went to the doctor and they were like, it's ribs. You just sort of have to deal with it. Take some ibuprofen. Sorry, bud.
Yeah.
It's great.
A few jobs ago, one of the interns asked me, "How do you know when you're getting older?" I was like, "Okay, I'm so happy that you chose me to ask this question. First of all,
Also, how long do you have?"
Well, I have a couple simple rules for this. You know you're beginning to get old when you start having a favorite pain medication. You know you're getting very old when you have different favorite pain medications for different types of pain. Those are the 2 rules.
Can confirm.
I mean, I've been old since I was about 12 when I fell in love with the magic of ibuprofen.
I'm a fan of naproxen.
I'm a fan of naproxen for certain things.
Yeah. See, very old. Naproxen is my go-to, but you know, there are sometimes other options, but I like it because it's long term and it doesn't upset my stomach. So, which is another one of those things when you start getting to the point where like just eating things can make you feel bad. That's also a really good sign of getting old.
Yeah, when you start developing food allergies that you didn't have before, that's good times right there. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, suddenly I can't eat avocados because like it makes my throat swell up a little bit. That sucks.
Yeah.
Suddenly I can't eat tomato sauce because it gives me acid reflux. That sucks.
Yeah.
I developed an allergy to beer.
Oh,
It's tragic.
that's a rough one.
I know, right?
Just beer or alcohol in general?
Just beer. Other alcohols have other problems, but apparently the only thing that I can tie it to, because I'm not allergic to wheat, barley, or hops or anything else, is that I have an issue with some component of brewer's yeast.
So Belgians for you.
That's sucky.
But even wild yeasted beers, because we have a really good wild yeast brewery close to us, it seemed to set it off though, so I'm not entirely sure.
And wine's okay, so it's not just yeast in general.
Yeah, wine and even champagne and
bread
regular
also
alcohol.
would be a thing.
Bread I'm fine with.
Huh. That's sorry, I didn't mean to start quizzing you, but it's like, gee,
no,
this is the
okay.
environment of people to immediately go into debug mode when they hear
right. It's like, okay, let's fix this. What components are there? Let's go through the ingredient list.
So what are your logs showing you about this?
Don't answer that.
I wonder.
Log hog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, the logs don't come out. That's the problem. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm actually now wondering what sourdough would taste like if it was made with brewer's yeast instead of just like wild yeast.
Like everybody else, I tried to do sourdough over at the beginning of COVID, but I just cannot keep a healthy culture. They turn nasty colors and awful smells, and
I hear that healthy culture is a problem for all kinds of tech companies, though.
yeah, ain't that the truth?
I was waiting for that joke. Thank you.
Oh, I'll be serving up straight lines for the rest of the. Well,
culture was even a thing at some companies.
Strep is a culture. You know,
true.
So every company has its culture. And I'm still trying to figure out good ways of determining culture during interviewing. Yeah, because nobody's going to say, "Oh yeah, my company is toxic as fuck."
Oh yeah, I failed that one. The only way that I've actually found actually is to really kind of challenge people and like be a jerk momentarily or something like that, and just see what kind of reactions you get, and or kind of say something that like I had a interview with Atlassian end early because I pointed out that I will not work well in a culture that is 100% product driven, where no thought is given to resiliency. And they said, "Well, we're done here."
Well, it's good. Saved you time.
I know, right?
It's the crazy early theory.
I recall that there was an article recently that mentioned reliability is a product feature. It is, of course.
Yeah.
As long as your product is a SaaS.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be able to if I'm paying somebody else to do the heavy lifting for a thing, I want to be able to use it whenever I need to use it. I mean, that's the whole point of paying them. And
That interview sure explained Bitbucket for me, though.
oh, Bitbucket. Yeah, there's at least my eye didn't twitch this time.
I feel like I should write a talk or three about interviewing and hiring manager stuff at this point in time, because I've done
Yes.
so many of them in the past 2 years, and like there's so many things that not necessarily like people have covered the, you know, equitable hiring practices pretty well, I think, in a lot of different talks and stuff that I've seen. But the actual, like, when friends and junior devs and other, you know, early career folks like ask me for input on like, hey, can you tell me if I'm interviewing at this place? Like, can you tell me some tips or whatever? Like, there's a lot of things there that, like, I feel like, you know, I was talking to one of my friends just earlier today, and I was like, yeah, here's a great example of something to do when you're moving from company to company is if it was a terrible experience at the previous place and they ask you about it, why are you moving to a new company? Why do you want to work here? Just say it wasn't a good fit. Don't be like, it was terrible over there. Just like, it wasn't a good fit for me. And, you know, he didn't even know that. He was like, I was going to say I wanted more money. I'm like, no, don't say that. Just, you know, and if they press you on it though, that's like the other part is like, if they keep pressing you on, why are you leaving? Why do you want to be here? That's a big red flag. Maybe you don't want to work there.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, I actually, what I said a moment ago is kind of a corollary to that. If there were specific things that made you leave a previous company, then sometimes it is good to talk about them.
Oh yeah.
Because you don't want to go into an environment that's just going to repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to bring those pieces up, but I wouldn't say, you know, the framing is really important there, in terms of like how you bring it up. I mean, rather than saying like it sucked because this, and this, it's like you gotta kind of spin that around and be like, well, how do you work with this type of thing? What kind of, you know, situations do you run into with blah, whatever the case may be? But I totally agree with you on that. Like, you do want to do your due diligence when you're actually, you know, looking, because you're the person who has the power. Like, and a lot of people, like myself included, you know, forget that when you're actually doing an interview, is like, you know, you're in the place of power.
That part is actually what I bring up when I'm talking to junior teammates about interviewing, and, you know, trying to help them prepare for their next interview. It is that, you know, there's a power imbalance while you're when you're interviewing, and it's not where you think it is.
Yeah. The other thing though that I will have to acknowledge though is that there, like, let me see, there's a lot of white dudes in tech in this room. So our experience with this is definitely not the same experience that a lot of people who aren't white dudes in tech get. So that's a very real and very unfortunate thing.
Yep.
And with that cheerful note, I have to go.
Oh, Scott.
I have a lot of good questions for like.
I got to run too, guys. I got an interview in 45 minutes and I need to eat before that because I need to get lunch.
Yeah. Cool.
Catch y'all later.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, Scott.
I have a lot of good questions that are like hit the recruiter, filter out recruiter questions. And I've talked about that a lot in one of the channels. I don't know where anymore. I can repost that if people are interested.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But I don't have during interview like things to check for. Like mostly because the things I'm looking for during the actual interview are not things that like you can easily find out during an interview, like the company culture type stuff. I love a guide on questions for that, just because I'm also job hunting.
I do know one thing I do. Somebody who's hiring a lot. I tend to do like a 3-phase panel, both the hiring manager panel, where like I'll spend all my time framing the role right up front, like spend 5-10 minutes talking about the role, the team, the roadmap, expectations. Then I'll step up to like the org. And what I've found is I can usually cram enough content that folks would have questions for into that, because that the second stop is like, what questions do you have for me? What can I dig deeper on that I didn't cover? And you learn by doing. And so I found that like the frequency by which folks have questions has significantly dipped, which means I've been able to cover stuff folks want to cover. But I think that's really important. Like rather than immediately starting out into talking to the candidate, right? It's really got to be a two-way street. You want them coming in fired up to come join your company. They know what the role is. They've got as much of an understanding as they can. Because it costs a lot to hire someone and then lose them, right? If you spend all your time focusing in on them, and they come in and they go, man, this is not what I signed up for. If only I'd known ahead of time, and they scoot within the first 6 months, you're upside down at that point in terms of your level of effort that's been invested. I think that's a really good strategy for hiring managers when they're looking to pull someone in, is to like spend a bunch of time telling the story about the role, the team, the org, the roadmap, the culture, tackling anything else they want to tackle, and then sliding into the third part, talking about the candidate, their experiences, what they're looking for, their next role, things like that.
Yeah, I think that in tech, we spend an awful lot of time talking about and assessing and trying to get a feel for experience level and whether somebody knows a specific language or that they have tech skills at all, and less about, is this going to be the right role for this person? Right? Like, some of us who have worked in tech for a couple of years that may have thrown our backs out making latkes, there's some years of experience. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how to do a Kubernetes, but I've run distributed systems for the majority of my career. Like, I don't need to know the specific kubectl arguments for putting a pod in production, because it's
isn't it amazing that like everything in tech that you work with today is something that you didn't know before? Like the attribute of tech is learning. It's like finding, people with that intellectual curiosity who really love learning stuff, because that's always going to be what you have to do in the long run, right?
Yeah, I'd be more interested in what skills somebody has as a individual contributor in what they do for learning new technologies, more so than what specific technologies they've learned.
Yeah, it's the learning and then the conscious effort to provide business value with what you've learned. And those are the two main things that I look for when I'm interviewing, along with ability to think deeply about something that you hadn't heard of a few minutes before.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Daniel, I think I talked over you.
Are you saying maybe I wasn't born with it? Maybe it is learning skills?
Amazingly. Yeah. I mean,
were you born with it, or was it Maybelline?
Yeah, exactly. That's
yes. I mean, I was copying BASIC out of a VIC 20 manual when I was 8. It means I know BASIC, right?
I know PBasic, sort of, from when I was playing with, parallax chips and a little robot in 2001.
So what you're saying is you're using the original Stack Overflow there when you were copying out of the manual?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
The other thing, like, I've always struggled with is how do you evaluate a potential manager in terms of what their management style is. Like, if they're going to mostly focus on just fighting fires, or if they're going to focus also on like directly trying to bring up their employees or their reports, right? Like, how much of that is the manager's just going to be shuffling tickets around and pushing towards their management, versus like, I don't know, more managing things.
Do you feel like you can ask that question in the panel, focusing on areas like roadmap and vision? I mean, because I know I'd want to, if I'm an IC, I'd want to assess a manager's ability to make sure that they consider that part of their roles and responsibilities.
I mean, sometimes I feel like I can ask that. Sometimes I can't. Lately, I've only had like a couple of manager level interviews. Mostly like most of the time I'm interfacing with recruiters, like initially enough that I don't know.
Oh, this is you screening a manager candidate to join your team and manage your team, or this is
Or
something else.
The manager that you're interviewing somewhere and you're talking to your potential, manager. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, see if there's a culture fit between you and a potential manager when you're interviewing to work at a place.
So I'm gonna let you in on a big secret. I'll give you 1 million bonus points when you ask me really good hard questions when I'm interviewing an IC, right? And I try to make it a really comfortable place for them to talk about what they want to talk about. Because like I said, I want them to get off that call and go, I want to go work for Nick. That sounds like a great role, right? And so we take notes. So like, bring the questions. I don't know, right? And if they dance around it and don't give you a good solid answer, then you've got your answer, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'd like to ask. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I've had a little bit of luck, it feels like, in video interviews, asking folks if I can, like, describing something that I feel like has gone well at a position in the past, and then asking them questions about their day-to-day workflow and like month-to-month workflow, to the point where a couple managers will just pull up their team boards and show me stuff, and I can start to get a sense of what the flows that they experience in their day-to-day are. So I don't know if maybe, Daniel, to your point, like by that point, I've already passed the point where I know I'm going to be at least minimally comfortable with the person I'm talking to. And so if I don't feel that up until that point, I'm probably going to pass on the job.
I've shared materials with candidates. Like somebody was asking me about like leveling, right? It's like, well, here, let me show you how it works here. Because I want them to know that. I want them to know like, hey, this is how I get promoted at this company. And that seems to have gone really well with, and people provide feedback afterwards, like, thanks for being so candid. You're really helping me make the right decision. So
I'll pull up Jira. I've done that before. Like, hey, here's Jira. Like, here is our legit backlog. Here's the things we're working on. Here's our next 3 months, because you can't really plan out much more than 3 months. Here's why we're doing it. And then it's like, I like what you're saying there, Nick, which is like, try to provide as much transparency as possible. And the hope is, I feel like, is that like what I would want to see in return is like questions that really dive into it. Like if you were actually working here, you should like ask me the questions that you would ask me when I say, hey, we're migrating from CloudFormation to Terraform, like what would you ask, right? Like I think that's something I always think about is, does it spur a great conversation?
yeah, and even if folks pass, like, hey, I got a monster offer, I can't not take it, but you're going to get a lot of positive accolade, and you'll get folks referring in if you're super candid with the candidate and laying it all out.
Mm-hmm. I like to ask hiring managers why they're hiring for that role. Like in their own words, not just from, you can get some of that from the website, from the job posting or whatever, but asking the hiring manager themselves, why are you hiring for this role?
So that actually brings me to a question, which is, oh man, we're at our time, but the one thing I'd love to hear is, what is your favorite interview question? Like when you're interviewing someone, and obviously vice versa, I would use it on either side. Like, what's your favorite question to ask? And I'll just kick it off with mine, because I do like this one that I learned a while ago, which was like, Joshua, who's been on a bunch of interviews with me, always hears me ask it, which is, tell me about, a time that you believed really strongly in something and you changed your mind on it. and hear that story, because it's fascinating to see how people will talk about like, you know, some belief structure that they held, whether it was like chef is great versus chef is not great, or like the proper way to bake bread is blah, blah. Like it's fascinating to hear that one. But I'm kind of curious if anyone has like a key question they always ask people, because it, you know, just brings good conversation.
I got one to help filter folks out. So you have them talk you through like taking leadership and technical ownership of a large functional project. They'll walk through it. You have, tell me where it was successful. They walk through it, and then you're like, hey, you got to do it again. What would you do differently? And when folks go, I got nothing, I did it perfectly the first go around, my answer is thanks, like duly noted, right? You know, usually somebody who's really candid and is, again, to your point, Pete, like they're not totally tunnel visioned into a particular, they can usually provide you some good feedback of like, if this problem showed up at my door again at this next new job, this is what I would do differently. I love that question.
Do you ask that as an interviewer or an interviewee or both?
Yes.
Okay.
Like ask a hiring manager or a person on the team that you're interviewing for. Ask them, you know, okay, so what was the last major project you worked on, and what would you do different?
I did have a candidate totally stump me though. He goes like, hey, you know, you've been where you've been for how long you've been there. Like, what do you wish you knew then that you would know now to help you? And it was like, holy smokes, dude, give me 90 seconds, 120 seconds to think about that. That was super deep, right? Because I'm used to the same series of questions. But yeah,
That's question I got from a candidate that threw me off was, when was the last time you took vacation? I'd never gotten in like 20 years, you know, or like this was like 5 years ago, 15 years of doing this. So he asked me that question, and I was just like, that was a good question. So yeah, keep that one in your back pocket, because that's a good one. That's probably when you're interviewing somewhere, you know, versus the other way. But you never know. It could be good either way.
I'll ask them that. I'll ask a candidate that. If they tell me they haven't, I'm like, oh, that's pretty strange. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one.
I think that would actually break some managers to know how much vacation I attempt to take. Because I take a lot of mental breaks throughout the year. And when you say unlimited PTO, I believe you. And what that really means for most companies, I have found out, is anything above 21 days, they tend to feel very icky about. Because I've gotten multiple managers telling me when I've hit about 21 days that they're like, hey, stop taking vacation.
It's not really unlimited, is it? It's a 20-day
No.
vacation policy.
No, it's really not. And looking at my vacation like my PTO times that I've taken off, I'm going to start being more aggressive with marking them as sick days instead of regular PTO days, so they show up differently. Because honestly, like the time I was taking off, I even like offered to do some things and be a little more flexible, and apparently I'm still taking too much time off, and I'm like, okay. The fact that he said that after I was already starting to look for a new job, I was like, okay, time to kind of accelerate that. But yeah.
Yeah, I gotta drop y'all.
Bye, Carl. Yep, we're out of time here.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us and participating in the conversation. And we'll see you next week for the hanging and the ops.
Sounds like
Bye.
a plan.